We're looking at KSG 330, one of the more complex shots we put together for Skywatch. Visual effects shot production has been going on since the spring of 2016.
Okay.
Which is a little over 2 years. It is a really long time, but it's 200 shots.
I'm just gonna fix your hair back
Sure,
here.
thank you. Appreciate it. Feel free to spit on it.
What made it challenging, Sandro?
Well, it's basically all CG.
The whole thing?
The whole thing.
What about that guy?
It's a digidouble handily animated by yourself.
Kelty did a
That's
pass
true.
on it, actually.
Yeah. It's just a cool, like, dynamic shot.
Was it a very complex comp, or is it fairly straightforward as they go?
It was medium level, I would say.
Oh, yeah.
I wouldn't consider that a big comp, but let's see. Start at the top. So we did shoot a plate for it, which looked like this. Overcast day. We would have liked to shoot it at nighttime, but the camera that the drone was equipped with wasn't light sensitive enough. The plan was to acquire a plate that we can use to actually put the shot together, which we didn't end up doing because there's a camera move that wasn't exactly what you had envisioned, but also there's so much CG work going into the rooftop to where it made more sense using the asset that we had already to a large extent created. So I basically just took a still from this to build the background for the shot, which, as you see in the final product, we don't really see a ton of it. But I went in and basically did a day for night, and to just kind of quickly jump back and forth. This is the background that ends up in the shot, and this is the original plate.
Wow.
So it's pretty heavily processed.
And you did all that in Nuke?
Yeah, cutting out the section that I needed, and then grading it down and creating some large pools of light, and then adding some point lights, window lights, more pools of light, a couple of street lights.
Awesome.
And that's it. And it's really simple. I just went ahead and projected this onto some really simple geometry. So here's a dome, and I just really loosely modeled the buildings. I wouldn't even call it modeling. I placed some cubes to where I wanted them.
Right.
Stuck a sphere around it for the sky, but really just bare bones. Just enough to get the parallax that I needed in the projection. So that ended up being the projected background. This wouldn't hold up by itself, but again, as part of the shot, it's perfectly fine. Then there's just some more treatment on it. So I used the same old foreground buildings that we used on the GBV sequence. It was the same asset, basically. So I just stole that asset for the glimpse of the foreground apartments we get to see there. So I popped these in. And here's your rooftop render that you had set up.
Gosh, that looks so good.
It does look really good. This is a straight render here, which already, works pretty damn well. This is just months of labor on your part, which was necessary for a whole bunch of other shots. So there's not a ton going on, just a little treatment, color corrections, spotlight, cranking that up. Again, just trying to pay attention to exposure.
Regarding exposure, is that just something you're kind of doing by eye and feel?
Yeah, I'm looking at other plates, like practical plates that we shot for this, where we had spotlights in a similar type of lighting
just
scenario.
To see what the lighting
Seeing
ratio
what the lighting
is.
ratio, exactly, yeah. So there's a flash pass. When the drone fires the canister, there's a flash of light. It's pretty subtle because we're still pretty far from the rooftop. And then, so that goes back on top of my background. I added some dust, little dust pocket where the drone was, or where the cargo drone picked up Sean. That's the light cone.
Which was another pass that came from Blender.
Yep, Blender pass. Rotors. So this is again the same treatment that we used across the movie, which is like simple nuke particle simulation.
And that came from the baked animation, basically from Blender?
Yeah, so we attached locators to each rotor in Blender, exported that, and then that was driving the particle simulation, which is basically what's happening over here. So it's a different simulation for each of the rotors.
Wow.
Yeah, it's mostly distortion anyways, so it wasn't meant to be like a big smoky element or anything. And then the drone itself, which also came from Blender. So we had to render this without motion blur, without depth of field, because we couldn't get it through the farm.
Is that the reason?
Yeah.
And then you did vector motion blur on...
Yeah, which works fine, especially for something linear like this. It's no problem.
Right.
Changing the glow of the rotors to red because it has already weaponized. Yeah.
For that, you're using one of the AOVs, which is...
we just rendered the transmissive AOVs here, which is, any kind of emissive shader will affect this. And so we're able to get the glow strips separately. And with that, we can subtract them out.
What about the interactive lighting?
That is a separate pass, this one here. So we just attach a bunch of point lights to where the rotors are, which would then be colored and graded to what it needs to be, and plussed onto the render.
Cool.
So
nice. Motion
blur, a little bit of glow there, and then defocusing that goes back on top of everything. And that's really kind of it. And then there's some camera shake on top of that. Grain.
So you added some camera shake in Nuke.
Yeah, we did some camera shake, as you know, in the camera itself, in Blender, but then additional camera shake in Nuke. And I think it's just a kind of an ambient camera wobble to kind of take the edge off of it. That's that. So not really crazy complex, but just a couple of really nicely crafted elements. Pretty good looking.
How long do you think you've worked on this particular shot?
You know, not that much compared to other shots.
Yeah.
This one came together pretty easily. 4 days maybe on this. Like if you just
magic
put it all back to back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.
That was a terrible high five.
All right, let's try it again. Oh!
That's better.
Oh my gosh, you even got some camera shake in there. Nice. All right, thank you, sir.
Please remain where you are.